These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources, in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. This week we'll be checking in with a producer near Valley, Nebraska, see how his corn and soybean harvest is coming along. Now is the time for cattle producers to be managing invasive weeds in their pastures. And Eric Hunt, he's standing by with an extended weather outlook for the harvest season. All of that and more is coming up on this week's broadcast, but let's begin here. Harvest, of course, a time to reap the rewards of a job well done. Before corn seed can be planted, though, seed must first be grown and harvested. This week, Steve White traveled to a Nebraska seed corn plant where harvest is not the finish line, it's just the beginning.
We often think of harvest as the end, but for some, it's just the beginning, the seed that will take root next spring.
As corn tumbles out, it quickly becomes apparent this isn't bound for feed or ethanol. Bella Jacobson loves what harvest means for the Bayer seed corn plant near Waco.
Super exciting time of year with harvest going on.
What it takes to get this job done.
From green corn receiving through husk sort, drying, shelling, packaging, the whole plant kicks into overdrive.
The whole 9 yards is happening this time of year, which is kind of cool.
About 120 farmers within 50 miles of Waco grow seed corn for Bayer. Nebraska irrigation allows for consistent production. Traditionally, seed corn is harvested on the ear, but Bayer is adopting a newer approach called direct harvest. As Jim Dowling explains, about 1 in 5 acres is shelled right in the field.
We're targeting that 30% moisture on the ear, and that's really just looking at the opportune time from a head shell off perspective, along with the potential of a freeze, right? We got to get the crop out of the ground before a hard freeze.
And that's more of your conventional harvest. So we're not bringing it in ear corn wise on the ear and the husk. We're bringing it in conventional and going out there with a regular case picker, picking that stuff.
Garrett DeRoss explains they provide support for growers up to and including harvest.
Just a close partnership with those growers. One thing we take very seriously is the safety, as we have a lot of people going in and out of those fields.
During the growing season, the plant relies on third-party vendors for spraying, detasseling, and harvesting. Once at the plant, shellers and cleaners remove cobs and debris before corn is put in bins with nearly 2 million bushels of total capacity. Much of that handled by automation.
So I think that's one thing here that I think people are really shocked by when they come and visit the facility. It's just how automated it is, all the way from the beginning to the end. Everything talks to each other essentially. Lots of different technologies and software used, a lot of different quality controls in place.
Even with that level of technology, there's a human element as they staff up during harvest.
So right here behind us.
Eventually, the big tower is where they apply insecticide, fungicide, and color every kernel
Off of the cob and ran through the cleaner.
It's a 150-acre campus, bringing in corn from 30,000 acres. A full-time staff of 64 works here. Robotic baggers fill 26 bags a minute, stacked, wrapped, and ready for shipment.
By the time it hits the dock and out the door, that perfect product is what gets to our customer.
They preach safety along with quality. For those like Bella Jacobson who work in the seed corn sector, harvest doesn't end with a truckload. That's just the beginning, powering the next crop.
I absolutely love what I do. I love this time of year. It's super rewarding. It's an adrenaline rush. It's hectic. It's a lot. It's a lot of hard work. I always like to say that, right? Like, we work really hard, but we like to have a lot of fun around here too.
A 6-week harvest brings a full year's output, serving the American farmer. Reporting, I'm Steve White.
Thank you very much for that story, Steve. Fun to see the whole process here on this week's show. Well, as summer winds to a close and pastures begin to go dormant, weed management might not be on the top of your mind when it comes to cattle production. However, fall can be one of the most effective times to control some of the toughest rangeland invaders. Market Journal's Mike Straub caught up with Nebraska Extension educator Ben Beckman to learn more.
Fall can be one of the most effective times to control some of the toughest rangeland weeds.
When we're looking at fall control options, specifically for herbicide options, it's really important that we have an accurate idea of our plants, because knowing what we have is going to make a big decision on what we do for control. So this time of the year, we're really looking at hammering on 3 different types of plants, our biennials. So a really good example of this would be like our thistle species. Those are plants that have a rosette that kind of grows here in the early part of or late part of the year, fall, and then next year we'll shoot up a seed stalk and a flower stalk and the noticeable part. But if we can hit it right now when it's a rosette, we get really good control of those plant species. So another species that we might be looking at controlling in the fall are our winter annuals. Those would be some species like henbit, a lot of our mustard species. Downy brome's a really good example of our winter annual too, and those are species that are going to be really similar to our biennials, but basically have a little bit shorter lifespan to them. So they're going to germinate here in the fall, going to overwinter, and then they're going to be up and producing seed really early in the spring. They kind of try to beat out everything else, is kind of their strategy. And then the last one that we're really looking at controlling are our perennial species. And this time of the year, our perennials are, because those plants live for several, seasons for multiple years, they are trying to pull down reserves into their roots during that fall period, really build up those reserves, because they have to make it through the winter without any really photosynthesizing going on. And so we've got kind of a perfect storm there where they're pulling reserves down to the roots. So if we can get herbicide on them while they're doing that, it's pulling that systemic herbicide down to where we want to get control, and we're going to get great action. The other thing is that if we can hit them now with a herbicide option, then they have to go through the stress of winter after having the stress of control measure on it. So
rather than spraying whole pastures, spot treating rosettes or patches of leafy spurge and thistles can be far more cost-effective and environmentally responsible than blanket applications. As you treat, take a moment to record what you sprayed, where, and when.
I always recommend spot treating when we can, just because there's a lot of really beneficial plants that we can have in pastures. And if we're doing a blanket herbicide treatment, unless things are really bad, we're hitting a lot of really good species as well as taking out the nasty ones. So if we can do a spot treatment and just hit the plants that we really want to, we're not expending a lot of money and labor and time on controlling plants that really aren't a problem. Sometimes we'll have annual plants that pop up. It's part of grazing cycles, part of the drought cycle. A natural system, there's going to be variation. And so it's a little bit of a waste to go after some of those plants if we don't need to. As far as keeping an accurate map and things like that, when we do have really tough species, I'm thinking especially for things like leafy spurge, Canada the thistle, things like that, where we can get good control on them. But if we get one plant that got left behind, those are noxious weeds for a reason. They produce a ton of seed. They've got really prolific root systems. And so we miss that one plant and all of a sudden that population explodes again. If we can keep track of where those populations are, it helps us go back next year and really look and see, okay, we did a good job of controlling, or, oh, here's a few plants that we missed. We need to stay on this and really get those under control. So, focusing on those areas where we actually need to control, and then having that accurate map so we don't forget a spot. Or we can kind of keep track of, hey, yeah, the patch is getting smaller, we're making some progress, or this really isn't working, it seems like it's expanding, or we've got a new patch over here that we need to take care of.
Fall has enough to keep you busy, but don't overlook the chance to set your pasture up for success next spring. Targeting perennial and biennial weeds while they are vulnerable can reduce long-term herbicide use and boost forage productivity. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Now, if you'd like some additional insights from Ben and other extension professionals on this topic, head on over to the website beef.unl.edu. When it comes to the markets this week, a surprise in the stocks report earlier this week pressured the corn market, and traders are now starting to eye some key support levels. Soybeans, meanwhile, continue to feel harvest pressure, and wheat fell to fresh lows despite limited issues in the Southern Hemisphere. To help make sense of all of this, we welcome this week on the show market analyst Jeff Petersen. All right, we've got harvest underway. Perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but let's talk about some of the news of the week. USDA report issued earlier in the week. We've got the stocks report. In particular, corn was an interesting number because of how far off the trade was compared to what USDA had published. What's going on there?
Yeah, as we dig into those numbers, you think about it, it's getting harder and harder, I think, as we get more storage out there, both at the farm level and also at the commercial level, to get a good survey on that. Also, everybody's so busy from the farming side and everything. Sometimes those estimates or the surveys come out and it's hard to get them filled out in a timely fashion. So I think we got a little bit of sampling on that maybe we weren't quite getting the responses that we'd seen. But you're exactly right. It was a surprise. As you look in and dig in the numbers, came in about 207 million more bushels than what we was expecting to see. We were, if you look at the ending stock number and what the estimate was for the 2024 corn crop, at about 1.325 billion is where it was coming out of September, and then to come in at 1.532 billion. And so that's a big increase. But as we dig deeper, I think a lot of it is important to look at is behind the numbers. So what they did tell us, NASS did tell us, is that production will come up 25 million bushels. And as you look at that 25 million bushel increase, they didn't change the yield at all, so they made some minor adjustments on the acres. What that does imply, though, is 182 million bushels less on the demand side. And so what that's going to mean as we dig in, so that 182 million, usually when we see an adjustment like that coming out of quarterly stocks, that comes right back over and works on the feed and residual number. Mm-hmm. And so that probably brings us down to where feed and residual will end up being about 5.5 billion instead of, you're down about 182 million from where it was. Now, beans were also off, if you take a look at beans, but nothing like what we saw in corn. Bean stocks actually were lower, 14 million. But what was interesting on them, though, is they did raise production 8 million. So in this particular case, what that means is that implies a 22 million bushel additional demand number. So overall, as we go into and roll into the October report, if there is an October report, we're going to end up having to see stocks increase on the corn side, and then also we'll have to see them decrease on the soybean side.
Of course, the reason why you hit that there wouldn't be another report in October is because we're in this government shutdown period as it stands as you and I record this conversation today. Back on the impact of that report, December corn as it traded through the Wednesday session, trading lower at a resistance level, I think, of 414 for December. What happens if we fall below that number? Where might the corn market be heading?
Yeah, so I think if you dig in and you look at the charts and some important levels there, the 407 level is a very important level that we need to be above that. And then if we would break through the 407 level, then you open yourself up to 403. If you'd break down below the 403, then I think the target becomes 392. Now, I don't think we'll get down to the 392. We have to keep in mind that the funds are currently short, and we are below the 100 and 200-day moving averages. So they do want to continue to sell this market in here, but they want to be cautious, though, because there is a lot of uncertainty yet on what the actual yield is going to be. A lot of variability in the yield. You've got a situation of really, it's the two corn belts. The western corn belt overall is okay on moisture and was good on moisture, but it had problems with the southern rust. And so depending on whether you treated or you didn't treat, depends on where your yield's going to come in compared to last year. Then you switch over to the eastern corn belt, and eastern corn belt was just, in parts of it, in the southern part of Illinois, it was wet early, then flipped dry, has been dry overall, and just really kind of had a really hard finish to that crop. And so you bring all that together, I think there's some adjustments that's going to have to be made yet on the corn yield. And those adjustments will have to be a lower yield going forward.
All right, how about on the soybean side of things? We continue to see that market be under pressure. Harvest is progressing, getting some early results. Is that what's pressuring the market at this point? Or I guess we also start talking South America this time of the year, don't we?
Yeah, I really think you've got three items as we dig in and take a look at the soybeans. I think the overhanging cloud over everything is the fact that we don't have any sales on the books going to China. We know we've got some very good sales on the books. It's not that there isn't sales, but if you really think about it, this time of year, right during harvest in October, November, we should be running close to 85 to 90 million, maybe even a chance of 100 million bushels that we're sending out, every week here for a few weeks. And I think if you look back to 2018 and 2019, which was kind of the last time we were in a trade war with China, what you'd be looking at there is that we'd probably be somewhere in the 55, 60 million bushels, maybe 50 million bushels. So I think the trade's going to be a little disappointed in what we're getting sent out the door from the export inspection side. Then you have to look over at the yield side, and overall, it's a west versus east thing again. In the western corn belt, we really have got some very good yields that are hearing on the soybean side. I think in many cases you could be looking at 5 to 10 bushels better than last year, depending on the area, depending on how much not southern rust, but sudden death. Then you go over in the eastern corn belt, and you've got areas in the eastern corn belt, as we mentioned on the corn side, they physically haven't had a rain through August into September, so they didn't get a real good finish on that. And then as you come back around and look at the soybean side, then you have to look at the demand side. We talked about it from the export side, but you also have to look from the crush side. Crush is going to be good, but that won't be enough to overcome what we won't end up seeing there go out the door on the export side.
Now, of course, the president did announce a deal with China. That was on TikTok, though, not soybeans, much to the demise of the American farmer as that news came out. Well, you laid out all these factors, Jeff. Here we are in the midst of harvest season. What are we going to do with the extra corn and soybeans we have on the books?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, so right now what you want to do is you really want to go through and look at, what do I have for acres? What do I have for yield? What do I have for storage? What about those bushels that are going to town? If you're taking those bushels to town and haven't locked up your basis yet, and they'll have to be sold at harvest, I'd encourage you on the bean size to get that done. If you're taking them in and you don't plan on selling them, what I would look at doing is I'd look at putting them on the delayed pricing side. I think we'll have a chance to get some bounce on the futures price. I also think once we get through harvest and have a chance at physically getting China in the market, we can have a chance to have some improvement on the basis side. But you're going to have to be able to ride through a lower market here on the futures price and also on the basis side. Then over on the corn side, I think on corn, I think you've got a window in here yet. If you haven't locked in basis, you're going to need to sell at harvest. You've got a little bit of time to do that yet. But have your basis set on that before everybody switches over to corn. But I would do the same thing on the corn side. With these extra stocks that we've got now, that's caused us probably not to quite get the amount of bounce that I thought we could get on the corn side, but I still think we'll get some recovery post-harvest.
Good conversation there, breaking down the grain markets with Jeff Petersen. Appreciate him stopping by our Market Journal set this week. Up next, some things go together, but swine production and solar energy production are not often uttered in the same sentence. That is unless you're talking about Jason Voles, who farms near Laurel, Nebraska. He installed solar panels on his hog finishing barns about 5 years ago. He shares how solar panels on his rooftops are saving him money on his energy bills in the October issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It's time now for a check of weather with Nebraska Extension's Eric Hunt. Eric, looks like weather is holding out pretty favorably when it comes to the fall harvest. I understand you've prepared a seasonal outlook, though, for us this week. What can we expect as we work our way through these fall months?
Thanks, Bryce. I do indeed have a seasonal forecast. Depending on your perspective, it may be good news, it may be bad news. Start off, I take a look at sea surface temperatures across the globe. So where we tend to look for our ENSO or El Nino or La Nina signal, we do have some colder waters across a lot of the central and eastern equatorial Pacific. That indicates that we are in a weak La Nina right now. That is expected to continue through the rest of fall and probably through a good portion of the winter with better chances of returning back into neutral conditions as we head into next spring. CPC shows for the seasonal outlook for temperature pretty much warm across the entire lower 48, with the exception up near the Canadian border, and generally drier than average for a good portion of the state, certainly the southern plains and the mid-south region. They are painting us dry. Equal chances across the eastern side of the state, wetter as we get toward the Pacific Northwest. Now again, this is what I'm going to show you here for the next few slides are generally based on historical precedent for El Nino and also what we see in some of the seasonal forecasts. So So the drought outlook shows drought developing across the southern plains throughout most of the south. I do think there's going to be some chance of seeing some more drought development across portions of the Midwest, particularly to our east. We've had a pretty good amount of moisture for most of the state here this fall. Granted, September's been a pretty wet month for the state of Nebraska. And I think the drought risk is a little bit lower this year than it has been the fall. But if we turn over really, really dry in October, November, then we may see some portions of northeastern Nebraska turn back into drought. Looking at the upper air pattern expected through the early portion of November, the European model shows a troughing being more persistent here across the Gulf of Alaska, which would mean more ridging here across the central and western portion of this continent. And if that's the case, that will keep us relatively warm and dry. Again, now historical precedent also show in years where we've had a developing La Nina and also a negative phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, we do tend to see this trough here across the Gulf of Alaska, more ridging here across the western and central portion of the continent. That tends to lead to a more northward storm track and warmer and drier conditions across our region of the country. Now again, this does not mean we're going to be like this every single day. I do think there'll be opportunities to get some cooler air and maybe some moisture in. I do not anticipate us being as dry in October this year as we were last year, although I don't think it'd be very hard. I don't think it'd be very hard for it to be wetter than it was last year in October. In terms of precipitation anomalies going through the middle portion of November, the European Weekly show very dry across pretty much the entire central portion of the U.S., including all of Nebraska. And historic precedent would suggest that most of the Gulf Coast, Mid-South region is pretty dry, also showing a pretty dry signal here across the central plains and into a lot of the western Corn Belt. So again, there are portions of northeastern Nebraska that have been relatively dry here the last 30, 45 days. So if we do remain relatively dry here for the next 6 weeks or so, I do think there will be a little bit of drought worries to contend with in this region. In terms of temperatures, looking at relatively warm temperatures above average being expected pretty much the entire region of the country. And historic precedent also suggests that we probably are likely to remain pretty warm through at least a good portion of November. Now again, this does not necessarily mean we're going to be really, really warm every single day, or at least compared to average. I do think there'll be opportunities to get some cooler air in here, maybe later portion of October. But as a general rule, we are likely to remain mild through at least the next several weeks. I do think there's a chance, though, based on historic precedent and some signals we're seeing in the global models, that we may see that pattern shift as we head toward winter. And historic precedent would suggest that years with La Nina and this negative phase of PDO, we can sometimes get a signal that does bring down some much colder temperatures here into the north central U.S. And here's the summer temperature and precipitation extreme for the summer of 2025, the state of Nebraska. Back to you, Bryce.
Thanks as always for that update, Eric. We appreciate it. Finally today, harvest of course continues as we speak, and this week our team traveled out to eastern Nebraska and the Valley area to see how things are shaping up for a producer in that region of the state. Chad Moyer, he's standing by with more from Douglas County. Chad?
Thanks very much, Bryce. Coming to you today from just northwest of Omaha in Douglas County. And today we're visiting with J.D. Widhelm. He is from the Valley area and just got underway with harvest here not too long ago. J.D., thanks for visiting with us here today. First of all, take me back to the beginning of the season. Just a quick overview. How did planting go for you guys this year?
Planting actually turned out great this year. It went smooth. We don't try to push anything, but it all went really nice, and I felt like we all had a really good crop. You know, it all came up evenly is what we wanted to do.
Sure.
So.
Explain, if you would, the moisture situation. Coming off a couple of dry years, 3 dry years, I think, in this area, maybe 4.
Yes.
What was the moisture situation like for you this year?
We were actually pretty worried about it, especially like this yield was corn on corn, and we do no-till up in the hills. And we're pretty worried about, I went in between the rows when planting, and we had just caught a rain, a week after that, which really helped get things going. But yeah, our moisture was dry. We had beans sitting in 2 inches, and it was dry dirt.
Sure.
So
when did the rains come? What sort of moisture did you get this year?
So it just depends from north up south here. Our north fields, over towards Arlington and over by Fremont just got poured on. But the water was able to move. So we'll end up finding out how much it sat here when we start picking over there.
So you had a few storms. How about on the disease situation? A lot of talk about southern rust this year. Did you find that was the case for you?
Yes, and especially in July, that high heat, high humidity, and moisture. It was just cooking throughout some of this corn, which we did fungicide on all of our stuff, and we'll see if it proves to really help this year. Picking through this number that we've had throughout the state from some of our reps have said it's really struggled with the disease, especially southern rust. And so far, that from what we've seen from fungicide, it's really helped with this.
Sure.
So,
All right. Well, let's talk about harvest so far. We said you just got underway here not too long ago. How is the early harvest going for you guys?
It has its ups and downs. We've had a couple, breakdowns, which I think we'd much rather have it now than in the middle or towards the end of the season. The numbers are okay. For what the corn has gone through and what we know about our number on this hill ground or this corn, we're okay with it.
Sure. I see there's a reel on the combine. Are you finding it? Is there some standability issues, at least in the corn right now, that you're finding?
Yes, especially with some of our wind damage, especially just north of here, we had a lot of wind damage, and that thing made it so nice. Last year, we were getting out almost every round, we just throw bunches into the combine when that reel just keeps it flowing.
Sure.
So it's helped out a ton. Hopefully we won't have to use it too much more.
Yeah.
But if we do, it is what it is.
Tell me about the soybeans. Are the soybeans close up to harvest, or have you taken any? What's the status?
We haven't picked any yet. A couple guys around us are picking like today. Our stuff, we were hoping to have our hill ground out before we start, but I think with this hot weather, it's really drying down, and we might be able to hit a field just by our place by the end of the week. That's all I know about soybeans. I'm hoping they look good. I'm hoping it shows.
Yeah.
Since we didn't have to do a whole lot of watering this year.
Sure.
And we don't have a lot of it laying over from the wind, which is nice. So I'm hoping we have some good numbers for soybeans this year.
Good stuff there, Chad. Interesting to hear about some of the challenges he's facing this year. Hey, as a reminder, we want to feature you here on Market Journal, discuss what's going on when it comes to your area of the state. If you or someone you know should be part of one of our upcoming shows, be sure to email us by writing into marketjournal.unl.edu. That is going to do it for this week's broadcast. If you did miss one of our stories, you can follow Market Journal over on our YouTube channel and chime in on social media. If you're looking for more ways to watch, you can log on to the Acres TV app, where you can watch Market Journal anytime. We certainly hope to see you right back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.